Bigfoot, Yeti, Sasquatch, skunk ape. There are tons of names for this cryptid that supposedly roams the forests of North America. And while there's no concrete evidence that any of these names actually refer to a real animal, there is evidence that North America was once home to a real ape that was much bigger than King Kong. Hi, it's me, your host of the fascinating world of ancient times, and welcome to my YouTube channel. Today we're talking about a very special kind of big ape. A big ape that lived in North America and was really big. It's hard to overstate just how popular the idea of a large, hairy, human-like creature roaming the forests of North America is. The most famous example is probably Bigfoot, also known as Sasquatch or by the slightly more scientific name Sasquatch. But there have been similar creatures reported all over the world, from the Yeti of the Himalayas to the Yowie of Australia to the orang pendek of Indonesia. And while none of those cryptids have been scientifically confirmed, there is one ape-like animal that fits the bill, and then some. This is Paranthropus robustus, aka the robust Australopithecine. And if that name doesn't ring a bell, you're not alone. It's one of dozens of proposed species in the genus Australopithecus, which refers to a group of extinct great apes that lived in Africa between about 4 million and 2 million years ago. They come in a whole host of shapes and sizes, from the short and stocky Australopithecus sediba to the incredibly long-limbed Australopithecus africanus. But they all have one thing in common. They're pretty much universally small, with most species standing around 3 feet tall and weighing about 60 pounds, give or take. That is except for Paranthropus robustus. See, when paleoanthropologists discovered the first Paranthropus robustus fossils in South Africa's Kromdraai Bee Cave in 1938, they were puzzled. Not only were the limb bones shorter than other Australopithecines, but the skull was massive with thick, robust bones and enormous chewing muscles. At the time, scientists thought it might be an early form of Homo erectus, and for a while it was grouped in with the other Australopithecus species. But over the years, it became clear that it was neither of those things. So in 1950, it was reclassified as its own genus, Paranthropus. And while we now know that it's closely related to Australopithecus, the relationship isn't super close. Think of it like a cousin, but instead of having 6 degrees of separation, there's like 2. Okay, so we've established that Paranthropus robustus is definitely a real animal that definitely lived in Africa. But how do we know that it was the size of King Kong? Well, back in 1984, paleoanthropologist Peter Ware got to work measuring everything about the skeleton. He and his team estimated that the individual they were working with stood about 5 feet 6 inches tall and weighed roughly 140 pounds. But that wasn't even the biggest one. See, after the initial discovery at Kromdraai Bee, Paranthropus robustus fossils started turning up all over the place. And among the trove of new fossils was a single molar tooth that was at least 50% larger than the one found at Kromdraai. If that tooth belonged to an adult, as seems likely, then it would suggest that this particular specimen weighed at least 200 pounds. And that's not even counting the largest fragment of a jawbone found in 1953, which seems to indicate a skull length of nearly 20 inches. By Peter's estimation, that would put the total weight of the animal somewhere in the neighborhood of 400 pounds. And that's just a rounded off estimate because there's a lot of missing data. Like we don't have a complete skeleton. So it's possible that it was even bigger. So it might seem weird to go from talking about the smallest Australopithecus to the biggest one known to science. But in reality, that's just how evolution works. Different populations of animals evolve differently. And sometimes those differences are just size. Of course, we can say for sure what the size range of Paranthropus robustus was, or even what it looked like. After all we have to go on are a handful of fossils. But it is pretty safe to say that the largest of these apes dwarf even the largest modern great apes, including gorillas, chimps, bonobos, and orangutans. All of which brings us back to North America, because it turns out that a relative of Asterisk, Paranthropus robustus asterisk, may have made its way here. You see, in 2002, primatologist Todd Disotell used a molecular clock to estimate the divergence times for several of the Australopithecus species. And according to his analysis, the ancestors of both Paranthropus robustus and the North American apes split from each other between 7 and 8 million years ago. Then between 6 and 7 million years ago, they shared a common ancestor with the human lineage. So, if we read talking about a time scale of millions of years and a distance of thousands of miles, then yes, it is possible that one large population of apes migrated across the Bering Land Bridge and evolved into a smaller population that was much larger. Now, that doesn't explain why they went extinct or why we haven't found their fossils in North America, but that doesn't mean that they didn't exist. And until we find either more fossils or better evidence that they did, all we can do is keep looking and keep digging for answers. Unless, of course, Bigfoot does it first. So what should we talk about next? Please let me know in the comments below. And don't forget to subscribe and like for new episodes every week. Thanks for coming along on this journey. See you next time.